WarsawJS.
I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to sit or stand, so let me be not decided. So while the talk of Rafa wasn't technical at all, mine will be all code, so be focused, a lot of code here. So yeah, I decided to show you how to implement your own promise library. For me, it's just pleasure of doing something from scratch. But if you're not motivated enough for this reason, I know of some employers who use this kind of challenge for an interview task, so you might want to hear. So yeah, I'll try with this one. Never used it before. So yeah, I just prepared a set of examples that document the behavior of the promise object, and we'll be going one by one and just implementing them. Yeah, this is the basic usage of the promise object. We just resolve a promise after 1 second with the value hello, and then define the callback using then method. So basically, it should just print hello after 1 second. So the implementation of that, once we define the boilerplate, first we define the resolver parameter. So at first, it's a bit tricky to get because this part here, the resolver, it's the whole function here. And then we pass a resolve function to it that will get the resolved value. So in exchange, we get the value. So with that value, we need to call the then method, or actually the callback pass to the then method. So first, we need to save it when someone passes it to us. And then when someone calls the resolve function, we can finally call the onResolve with value. So it's fairly straightforward. And I'm really proud that I coded a little Vue component using ChatGPT because I do not know Vue for running code on the slides. So yeah, it actually works. In all of the slides, we will see the little flag showing up. It says that the execution started, so you could see the delay here. Yeah, so now we have a really similar example, with the exception that now we resolve the value immediately. So actually, with our code, nothing will happen when you run it. And it's because at the time of running the resolve function, we didn't have onResolve defined. So basically, nothing will happen. So to fix that, when someone resolves value, we need to save it for later when we have the callbacks available. So let's do just that. Here I just extract the resolve function to the method. I called it propagate value because it makes more sense to me than resolve. Yeah, here we just save the value. And we not only want to save the value, but we want to save the fact of resolving. So basically, if someone resolves value that is undefined, we have no way of telling whether it actually resolved or not. So that's why it's useful to have another property that says resolved. And then in our then method, if someone calls the then method, and we already have the resolved value, we can just call the onResolved right away. So this should actually make this example work. And it works. So here's a little twist. It's about the order of things. If we print something right after our then, in our implementation, it nicely prints hello world. But it turns out that if we go to the native promise object, the order is reversed. It's word hello. So this isn't something that we need to think about in most of the times, but it turns out that the resolver function is called synchronously in the same event loop iteration, but what we pass to the then method is called in the next event loop iteration. So basically, we need to mimic that somehow. We won't be able to do that perfectly. This is like microtask, macrotask queue differences, but here, for the purpose of this presentation, we can just basically fix it by running this part in set timeout 0, which will just put it to the execution of the next event loop. And here's the example that looks a bit more what we are used to. So let's see how to implement that. So yeah, for now it's unchanged. It's all that we added before. And here it's basically when we work with promises, we see that it's almost like the then method makes another promise. So we are doing just that. In the then method, we'll just instantiate a new promise. And then instead of storing onResolve on ourselves, we will store it on our child. So this nicely gives us this opportunity to have more children in the future. Basically, we no longer have the onResolved on this object. We have it on this.child, so we need to also execute it there. And let's see how it works now. It just prints hello, so we are halfway there. We didn't break anything, but it's still not the example that we want to see. So we nicely created this chain of promises by the child property. But we need to actually make this value flow through this chain. So here's a little animation that I made. It's very professional. So yeah, basically, each time the onResolve executes, we need to get the last value from the onResolve callback and pass it to the child. I always finish before this animation. It's too slow. Yeah, so basically, we need to call the propagate value on the child here. So basically, we just say, okay, go propagate it to your children, or so with this additional line, the code works like the following. Basically, it prints hello twice. So we executed the chain, but the value doesn't change. So how do we get the actual value from the another onResolve? It's basically just returned by this onResolve callback. So if we get it here and pass it to the child, we get a hello bye. So yeah, now with, there's about 15 lines of code, and it already does something quite complex. Yeah, this is actually a break time for me to have some water. And also, oh, thank you. Also, this is the first time I used SlideDev for making my slides, and I was so impressed. It was so easy to use for developers. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but both of these tools are open source, and the one thing that I really liked in SlideDev that you can actually make or embed your own view components. So yeah, if you're a developer, you can really go crazy with your slides. And Excalidraw, I use it all the time at work to make really nice, architecture diagrams or something like that. Please use those tools, or I don't know, contribute. They're amazing. Thank you, guys.
Wow.
Yeah, so we are almost there. Here's the part that makes the promises feels like magic. So before, basically, when we had a lot of asynchronous code and we just defined callbacks and callbacks, we would end up in a place called a callback hell, which would be basically this really awful level of nesting. And one feature that promises have is the flattening of the chain of promises. So basically, if we want to do two async operations in sequence, we can just define the chain of these operations instead of doing further nesting. So basically, this console log at the bottom should execute with the value by after another 1 second. So let's see how it works currently. It just prints hello promise because we just, print whatever comes from the previous onResolve. So basically here, if the next value is a promise, we want to do something else. And it turns out it's quite simple. We just need to wait for the value from this promise, and then we propagate the value to the child. So it can be shortened to this. Sorry. Oh, so let's run it. Hello and bye. So yeah, another feature of promises is that it's not only a single callback. We can actually pass an object that represents the operation that can be finished or might not be finished. So basically, at any point in time, we can just access the value by calling then. So in this case, we have two separate chains of operations, one here and one at the bottom. So it should basically print hello after 1 second, then bye after 1 second, but here we we print hello basically at the same time that this hello should be printed. So in reality, this should be hello twice, and then bye after a second. So if we run it now, it just prints hello, so it's obviously wrong. And it's because we have a single child property here. And we just overwrite it when we define another chain. So basically, this is the moment when we can finally have more children. Instead of storing a single child, we can just have an array of children and do all of this propagation and child processing for each one. So this is it really. If we run it now, we get hello, hello, and bye. So both of these chains run. And there's one twist here. What happens if we have these two chains in different points of times? So let's see how it should work in the native implementation. So basically, it should just print hello after this 3 seconds, because when we come to this point, the P promise is already resolved. So if you want to implement it, or actually, I didn't show you how it works with our implementation. So our implementation is actually rerunning the children again. So here's the final change, which is basically just removing the children when we already processed them. It's kind of a rule that the single callback for a promise runs once. So if we just process that, we can just forget about them. And it works. So yeah, basically in 30 lines of code, we have a really powerful idea that makes JavaScript a really pleasurable language. Obviously, it's not complete. It doesn't have like, I don't know, catch method or something like that, but the core idea is there. So yeah, I think it was really easy to implement by having these examples. And this is something I really try to do at work too. Like first start with definition of the problem and different use cases, and then the implementation, the code is usually much more obvious to write. And this was all I prepared for you today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kacper. Any questions about this promise, this very promising promise? It looks kind of complicated to me, but everything looks complicated to me. Any questions? Here we go. Oh, I heard that nearby. You promised it's going to be just a question. Yeah? Okay.
Where can I find these slides? Because I kind of want to do something similar to
the slides. Yeah, so actually they're local on my computer. There's not even a repo, yet. So let's be careful with this computer, and if it doesn't, burn down or something, I can just deploy it because it's just a website, so I can deploy it using GitHub Pages or something, and I'll make sure to post a link on Facebook, on WarsawJS or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. First of all, maybe that's going to be a silly question because I'm just a wannabe developer right now with exactly 0 days of commercial experience. So I mostly understand what you did there, but I never seen console log without any parameters right there.
Oh, sure.
What I've seen there, this is the first time it's not even, I haven't even written that because I haven't written a lot of stuff by myself, but this is the first time that I've seen a console log without any parameters, and it done something, and I don't really understand why it console logged exactly those results that response that been there. Could you explain that?
Sure. So basically, it starts with the first example. So probably I didn't have to use it, but it's just a shorter way of logging something in this way. So it all comes from the fact that in JavaScript, there's this concept of functions as first-class citizens. So basically, function is just a value that you can pass. So there's really no difference. Or actually, if we have 5 more minutes, I can just show you.
5 minutes?
Yeah, maybe not 5, maybe 30 seconds is enough. Oh, I will be coding with one hand. This will be fun. So basically, if we have a promise, like this one. Oh my God. Sorry. Oh, bigger. Yeah. Guys, I don't think it's going to work. I'm doing hardcore stretching of my fingers here. Oh, thank you. What a wonderful human being. So yeah, if we have a promise here that we just resolve right away. Even bigger, right? Probably. Okay. Yeah. Let's go crazy. Okay. So if I do something like this, console log the value. Maybe I even want to console log an object with a property value so we know it comes from here. It will say that, right? Then a similar thing I could do is to just print the value, right? It will print hello. But then basically, if all I do is execute this function with the same parameters I get, so basically here, this whole arrow function is a new function, right? And all I do is just pass these parameters to the console log. I might as well use console log instead of this newly created arrow function, right? So basically, this all shortens to this one. Cool.
A lot of fun.
I'm glad.
I remember that we have multiple children for our promise. Why do we need
wait, I need to locate the person that's speaking. I feel weird without that. Oh, thank you. Now I can listen to you.
So why do we need multiple then for one promise? Why can't we have just one child in general? So why do we have to implement children? And it's still strange because I haven't seen that people ever use like 2 then for one promise. Mostly we have just one promise and we have 1 then per one promise.
So I'd say this is a convenience that if you are used to very simple asynchronous flows, you usually do only one thing when something asynchronous happens. But in more event-driven systems, stuff like that, you have a lot of async operations and a lot of things that depend on these async operations. So actually having this abstraction of an object that is an async operation and not a single point in code, a function that will execute when this operation finishes, you just get much more flexibility from that. And sorry? Yeah. Nice.
Thanks. Okay, so I think I've got a good example of when multiple vents come in really handy. So first of all, there's something called cache stampede. It's when you're using caching, so basically remembering the values of past calculations of I don't know, some HTTP requests or some such. So a cache stampede happens when your cache is cold. So when your cache is empty, when you've just started an application. So what usually happens when your caching implementation is naive, you usually have a map, a container for those pre-computed values that you've done before. But what usually happens at the start is like you get 100 or 1,000 requests for the same thing. So you start computing them all in parallel. And if you do a naive implementation of caching, so basically you do key value, then it's not going to solve your cache stampede problem because you're still going to have parallel computations. Like the value is still not there, so you're still firing up new threads of computation for the same thing. Whereas if you're using a map where you assign a promise to each sought value that you would need, it solves your cache stampede problem instantly because then you're registering you're not checking for the presence of a value that's computed, you're checking for the presence of a promise. So am I computing or have I computed this value? But this little trick allows you to decrease the load on your backend services, on stuff that actually computes stuff for you, sometimes by 1,000-fold. So this is one situation where the memoization, the remembrance of promises versus the final values that they convey is super helpful. Like I use this all the time because I deal with a lot of backend stuff. So yeah, if you're gonna stay for networking, then we can discuss this later because I'm gonna be here for a while. I think so. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.
So yeah, this is my final question. I mean, final question that's coming from me. It's a small one. What is your honest opinion for when you're tasked to write your own promise implementation during the job interview?
So I'm the worst actually because in my company I'm known for doing hardcore JavaScript questions. I think in some situations this is justified. If you work with code bases with really convoluted JavaScript, you want someone who thinks in JavaScript, and when they need to do something like, they're like, oh, fun, let's do it, But in many positions, when you're building a web application that maybe doesn't have so many legacy areas, then maybe, I don't know, maybe not going beyond that surface is enough. I'd say it also shows if someone is like, really, I don't know, passionate about it, because usually you don't need it, right? So if you just think about, am I able to do it, and you do it, then it just shows that this person might be the guy you're looking for. But I'd say for most of the positions, no, it's not necessary.
Wow. Okay.
Can I just get one last question?
Sure.
It's a very important person.
There's a very important person in here?
There.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course.
Sure. It's a nice story.
I need to tell it because 8 years ago there were two very small guys at our WarsawJS Meetup. It was 8 years ago, and these two guys said that they have something that makes fantastic with Arduino, right? And this guy, he was 17, and he showed in front of the whole community that he really figured it out. And it was so amazing. We were, oh my God, what this guy is going to do in 8 years, and now we can see it. So, and they had this performance together with Bartek. So Bartek, you're absolutely entitled to have this question.
Okay, so it's more of a statement than a question. I know you like them. But I think what Kacper wanted to say to you about the last question is more or less what Rafa was also trying to say about knowing your fundamentals. So if you do that, I think like you know how promises work. Kacper in this presentation like showed you a lot of different edge cases that you have. And I think that's a really valuable thing to do, even if those are like interview questions, to learn those things and you get the gist of fundamentals and what happens underneath, more or less. If you can implement it yourself, well, I think you understand it better, and I think that's why it's super valuable to do those things. And the second thing, it's not a question, but follow up to what Piotr said, is that we've been coming here for a long time, and you may have noticed on Facebook message about Kacper's presentation that it said that Kacper is a junior developer that has been working with, I don't remember what exactly, but I think that was one of the first bios that you've created, and that was from 8 years ago, and that's why it still said junior developer after 8 years. So yeah.
Wow, junior developer, this is a very big child, yes? Speaking of children. Very big child. It's really nice to hear that you guys have been coming here for so long. I think that's very encouraging. For me, it means that maybe we have some kind of a longer future. Kacper, it really was fun. It really was fun. We thank you very much for your presentation. Give Kacper a hand.